Blake, who's the queen? Is it Beyonce or Taylor or...
Toby, even Travis Kelce knows who the queen is by now.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who plans to have Taylor Swift as the queen used as the epitaph on my headstone. And I'm here with my co-host who plans to have Can Someone Bring Me a Taco as his headstone's epitaph, Toby Walters.
I wish our listeners could see our show notes so they could see that you spelled epitaph as epitaph.
Yeah, I definitely was. Let's just say for today's recordings, I was Googling stuff on how to pronounce it and spell it, and I was only halfway successful.
Yeah, well done, Blake. So we can argue Taylor, Beyonce, but...
Is this just a Taylor Beyonce pod at this point? I mean, people are going to riot.
I think it's mostly just a Taylor pod at this point because you're so, you write the show notes, my man. So
you write your own quips.
So at Church of the City, we had our 10-year anniversary celebration, and I've been part of multiple anniversary celebrations at different churches, over my lifetime. Have you been to, it's like fellowship done a 20-year recently?
On all the anniversaries of churches, they kick me out. So that's when I start my next church.
So at Church of the City, which is right in the heart of Franklin, obviously we have not even access to Christian music celebrities, but that is their home church. So the church planned this big 10-year anniversary celebration. And they said on this Sunday, and it was mid-September this year, and they were going to do a concert on the lawn, both on Saturday night and Sunday night as a 10-year anniversary celebration. And the pastor said that he had arranged some special guests from the Christian music
You didn't tell
industry.
me you performed.
Well, it's Blake. I don't know if you know this. My heyday as a Christian music celebrity is a little bit past. So
bullcrap. We're bringing it back.
So the pastor kind of teased, who it was going to be, and all of us had our guesses because we know some of the celebrities that go to Church of the City. We all know that Chris Tomlin calls that home.
I didn't know that until right now.
Yeah. We were all kind of hoping that maybe Nate Bargatze would do a set because that's his home church as well.
That's the only comedian you could get that's boring enough for church. I mean, clean enough.
How about John Christ? There are other Christian
people don't
comedians
like him anymore.
Well, there's still a lot of Christian comedians out there. So they got everything set up out on the lawn, and they brought in a local production company like Four Wall, brought the lighting in. I don't know which production company it was, but they had Church of the City has a mobile stage, and then they brought in local production company. They had a D&B line array. They had a Quantum 338 at front of house. And
is this
monitors.
A celebration or a conference with sponsors?
I mean, it was a good sized event. I mean, when you get all the attendees of the different campuses at Church of the City, there were probably 5,000 people at each night out on the lawn. So the first night, and I actually got to hear who it was beforehand because I know the production team. And so they told me who it was going to be. So the first night they had Ann Wilson and For King and Country.
Nice.
And I didn't go to that night. We had family plans that night, but I'm a big For King and Country fan. I love them. And then we went to the second night on Sunday night. And that Sunday morning, the pastor had teased that he was able to line up he called it kind of his dream artist, that if he could get this person, that would be the craziest win. And
did Taylor Swift actually perform?
So he gave it away essentially by saying she texted last night and confirmed that she can actually do it. So literally the night before, this artist texted him saying, "Hey, I can actually make it." So first of all, they had Matt Maher, and you probably don't know Matt by name, but you have sang many of his songs. He is a prolific worship songwriter, and he was awesome. He had just a stripped down set with
whoa, Toby. Whoa, this is a Christian podcast.
This is a musical term. I know you don't know anything about music.
Okay.
But it was an acoustic set. It was him and a bass player and just a percussionist. And it was kind of like a Johnny Cash kind of set. He has that like thick drawl voice, and it was awesome. And then Chris Tomlin did come up at that point, and again, kind of did like an acoustic set. He had a full band, but it was acoustic feel. And we'll get to this in a minute, but he was struggling with his in-ears. Obviously,
really?
I mean, in kind of you call this a festival setup where you have multiple artists coming in, but there were only 2 or 3 artists each night. You figure, they could have longer sound check, but he was you could just tell he was constantly walking back and forth to the monitor board to try and get things fixed in his ears.
Only we knew an in-ear guy.
I know. And then the special guest, she came up. Who do you think it was?
Well, was it the Queen?
One would argue it was the queen of Christian music currently. Who would that be, Blake?
Carrie Underwood?
No.
Reba McEntire?
No.
My childhood crush?
You're talking about country music. So Lauren Daigle took the stage. And I would say at this current, Christian music world, Christian music climate, that she is the queen of Christian music currently. She's kind of like, how Amy Grant used to be back in the 80s and 90s. I know, Blake, like you don't even know these names.
Hang on, no. I recognize Amy Grant. I do.
You don't know who Bono is, but you know who Amy Grant is.
I listened to 88.7 growing up, man. It was it was Way FM.
So, Lauren came up and she sang a song or two with Chris Tomlin and his band, and then she did her own set as well. And it was awesome. Like the whole night was great. You got thousands of people out in the lawn, just a great worship night, and all made possible, obviously, by Lauren's in-ears. I mean, how else can you get to the level that she is at without having those in-ears?
Well, speaking of someone that really could have used Chris Tomlin's help, the in-ear monitor sommelier himself, the maker of earphones for rock stars, Eddie Cruz. Eddie, welcome to the show. Can you confirm you didn't make Chris Tomlin's in-ears that night?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Oh, no. Wait a minute, Toby.
Now, granted, Tomlin's issues, I can almost guarantee you, had nothing to do with his actual ears, his actual in-ears. It would be the person mixing monitors, who is very likely not his regular monitor mixer. They weren't using their regular production guys. It was the crew from the production company that provided, the sound for that event.
Guys, this is such a dumb question, but why do you have to mix monitors for the person on stage? Why can't they just listen to the mix? Like, I don't get it. Like, I've always heard this. I've never asked about it. Why is that?
Eddie, you want to explain this one for our cute little boy Blake here?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you're talking in-ears, it's a highly personal, preferential thing. There's some musicians who just want drums, bass, and click, and then whatever else kind of blends in. Others want to hear it like they're listening to a record. They want the nuance, they want the detail. So there's a bunch of varying levels in terms of what factors into why people might want that, or what the preference is.
Is there any hot takes though and opinions on like what the right mix is for that? Because it seems like, I don't know, that seems odd to be on stage and be selective about what I'm hearing. It seems like I should hear it all to know what's going on actually.
Well, Blake, as you have you seen around church gear, Avioms? Those are personal monitor mixers, and Avioms was one of the first to create like your own mixer, which all the musicians would have in front of them, and then it has up to 16 inputs, so they can turn up the bass, they can turn up the guitar, turn it down, turn their vocal up. They can, eventually they got stereo mixes, so they could pan them to different sides. So as you are hearing your voice right now, as we're recording the podcast, does it help that your voice sounds good in your ears?
Well, that's true. That's very true.
So when I was a Christian music artist, in-ears were very early on in their iteration and technology. And so I would often have one in and one out so I could still hear the audience. Whereas now there are ambient mics and room mics and, we could get into Clang, creating like 3D technology. Because when you are, when you're sitting out in the audience, you're listening to the mix, you're hearing everything around you. You're hearing the room, you're hearing the people around you. But when you go up on stage and you put suction cups into your ear, all that sound goes away. So you're reliant on what's coming into your ears through those in-ears to actually gauge your performance.
This is so weird to me. Eddie, how do you like yours mixed?
It depends. It really does. I have a couple different sets given that I work for a manufacturer that makes in-ears. Depending on the band, the setup, I play music as well as, mix out and stuff. But if I'm doing a mixed gig, I'm going to take something that's going to be more nuanced, that's going to give more clarity and depth. If I'm on stage, it just depends on the size of the band, who's all playing, if it's a stripped down set, if it's kind of got a full production, backing tracks, the whole deal. So I have a unique advantage, owning a couple sets. But in terms of how I build my mix, I just want a lot of energy. When I play guitar, I want my guitar up front so I can hear the level of detail that I need to help the energy translate in the room.
Okay, hang on. This is making a little more sense to me. So I want to block out everything else because I don't have control over that. I want to hear what I'm contributing so I can make sure it sounds good. Is that kind of the basis for it?
I mean, that's the starting point. Like Eddie's talking about his guitar. You want everything else that's important in order to know where your guitar fits in with the rest of the band. But go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're kind of working with a bunch of different elements. Like if you're in a touring band, you're going to have a music director, someone on stage helping lead the band. So that's going to be different. Like churches nowadays are using multi-tracks, so you got multi-tracks lady in your ears, counting you in and telling you what sections of the songs and all those things. So it just really depends on, your role in the team, in the band, and what you're doing.
Fascinating.
And there's a lot of politics to it if, we use that word correctly. So I was joking with the production guys at Church of the City because they have a Rivage at front of house and they have a Rivage at monitors. But the Rivage at monitors is, I forget which model is which, but the one at monitors is twice the size as the one at front of house. And I said, I love how you guys have the much bigger footprint at monitors. And I thought they were kind of joking. They're like, yeah, we got a lot of divas on stage. And I just sort of chuckled and they didn't laugh. They just,
Oh, no.
So, if you're singing a certain part, you might want to hear certain things, but you also might want to not hear some of the other singers because they could be distracting to what you're trying to do, even though you want to know that it fits in with the whole. It's very tricky, but then you want to tell the monitor mixer, hey, can you take Julie out of my ears? But you don't want Julie to know that.
I hate how Julie sounds. She's the worst. We need to fire her.
Truth be told, if I'm, like I said, it just depends if I'm playing with the rotation and musicians where I'm just gonna be like, this isn't gonna be hyped. I'm gonna use a different set that doesn't really expose kind of different levels of clarity and detail, because sometimes hearing too much can kind of impact it. And in my brain being, technical, I listen for the technicalities and I'm just like, okay, that's gonna be too distracting. So I'll use something that kind of helps me and affords me the best ability to do what I need to do that morning.
Toby, did you ever have a MySpace account?
100%, Blake.
This reminds me of Top Friends. Yeah, Julie's not on my Top Friends. I don't let her in my mix, but Billy is always at the top.
And it's a completely different art, so to speak. I know it's like both are mixing if you're mixing front of house or if you're mixing monitors or if you're mixing broadcast, but it's very different. It's like, painting with pastels versus drawing freehand. It's a very relational thing when you're mixing monitors because like all those musicians on stage, they're relying on you to give them specifically what they need. And you also have certain levels of relationship. Like if you're mixing monitors for Tomlin's band, you're going to make sure you get Chris's ears right. But the utility guitarist, you're going to do the best you can, but that's not going to distract you from making sure Chris's ears are right, for example.
I was just about to say, is everybody getting their own personal mixer, or is there one mix engineer for every single person's in ears?
It depends.
This is so complex.
It can be nitty gritty. I blanking on which act off the top of my head, but they have a dedicated engineer for like the primary talent, like lead singer and stuff for them to make sure their mix is dialed. And then they have, like Toby said, like the kind of like secondary mix engineer that focuses more on the backline band or like auxiliary musicians and that type of thing. So,
Toby, can I get a mix engineer for our corporate meetings when I don't want to hear about operations problems? Can I just have operations mixed out of my mix?
Isn't that when you just get up and go to the bathroom for like 45 minutes? I'm like, Blake, you need to eat some more fiber, buddy.
Guilty as charged. Okay, I must admit, this is the furthest drift I think we've ever gotten from our 5 Truths and a Lie after the intro. But it's
kind of like we're jumping into the meat of the subject before our 5 Truths and a Lie. So
now we got to go back to the appetizers.
I know.
I do love some chips and queso though. So here we go, Eddie. Let's see if you can get us, now that you have educated me. Number 1, I played in a band that toured with Phil Wickham and Jeremy Camp.
All right.
Toby, I heard Jeremy Camp's name like 1 billion times on Way FM. Is he good?
Do you know who Jeremy Camp is?
I know. I heard his name 1 billion times.
Okay.
I'm guessing he's good. Number 3, my family lineage has royalty in our bloodline.
That can mean a lot of different things.
I'm not going to say anymore because I have a hunch on how that can help me win.
Like, Blake, I am the Duke of Sopapillas, my favorite Mexican restaurant, because I've checked in more on Yelp than anybody else in the world. So therefore, does that mean that my family has royalty in their bloodline?
How many times do I have to tell you that Yelp and genealogy.com are not the same, ancestry.com, they're not the same thing. Number 3. I have visited 5 of the 7 continents. These freaking audio guys, they are on all the continents, and they always get me with this one.
Wouldn't it be funny if the lie was like, yeah, there's not actually 7 continents? Because right now in my head, I'm like, wait a second, there are 7 continents, right?
There are 2 continents. There's America and there's everybody else. Number 4.
There's America and not America.
Yes. If I had to take a geology test, not geometry.
Oh my
What is it?
gosh, geography. Wow. Blake, I told you about drinking before these things, man.
You don't know what's in this D&B mug. All right. Number 4. Each of the 4 members of my family was born in different states. They got 4 different
Just
bloodlines.
focus and read here.
Number
Come on.
5. I once got swarmed by killer bees and only got stung once. That has to be the lie. If he got stung by a killer bee, he's dead.
It doesn't work that way. You have to get stung by a whole bunch of them.
We need to rename this.
I know.
Number 6. I once had to prove to the government that I wasn't 3 feet tall.
Okay, he's sitting down on his end of this podcast, so how do we even know that he's not 3 feet tall?
Eddie, this is one of the most difficult ones we've ever had. Like, I don't have a clue on any of them, so I'm going to guess just right off the bat so we can get to it. I'm going to say each of the 4 members of your family was not born in different states. I'm going to guess that that's true for 2 of them, and then the 3 and 4 landed in the same state.
And Eddie, I'm going to guess that your family does not have royalty in your bloodline. So what's the lie?
Truth? Yeah, we've locked in. Yeah, what's the lie?
I have not visited 5 of the 7 continents.
Dang it! Every time. Are there 7 continents? Can confirm.
There are 7 continents. Technically, I've only visited 1 continent because I live on one of them, so I didn't visit it.
All of these audio guys, though, are so well traveled. I shouldn't even say audio. Like all church techs come on this podcast so well traveled.
If they toured,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
yeah. All right, what was the band you were in that opened for?
Oh
Wickham and
man,
Jeremy
so
Camp?
we're going back to like late 90s, like 99, 2000. Actually, we're both Jeremy Camp and Phil Wickham both got started in Southern California. I grew up going to Calvary Chapel and that network of churches, and they were part of it as well. And so there was this ministry called Worship Generation, and so it was kind of like a mixture of worship bands and stuff. And we would travel and tour around and play, lead worship at different events and stuff. So Jeremy Camp and Phil were both involved in that. And our band was called Straight and Narrow. I was added later. I was not a participant in naming the band.
I love those like cheesy 90 Christian band names because we were all in one.
That is such a good name, though. Yeah. Like, you could pick up girls so easily. Just tell your mom I'm in the Straight and Narrow band. I'm as good as it gets kind of guy. Speaking of picking up chicks to make a lineage, should we cut that?
No.
Okay. You said your family lineage has royalty in your bloodline. Who's the royal? You and Henry buddies?
So it's actually very interesting. About 5 or 6 generations back, on my dad's side, she was a princess, a duchess or something like that. And she was in royalty and she married a commoner. And so she and her husband moved to the States and settled here. And that's how we ended up here in the States.
And what country?
Oh, Spain. Sorry.
Okay. Spanish royalty.
That's why he can't visit other continents. He's got warrants out for his arrest. Okay, so then how did you prove to the government you weren't 3 feet tall? What is the deal with that?
Why did the government think you were 3 feet tall?
This one will, yes. Okay, so this one will get my blood boiling. So
he's so even kill. I can't imagine him being mad.
So here's the thing: is all of my answers kind of play off each other and kind of shed light on different, parts of the responses. But so I grew up in Southern California. That's where I lived, and then I first moved to the state of Oregon, where one of my children was born. And then now reside in Vancouver, Washington, where my other child was born. So But before that, when we first moved to Oregon, we were doing like the DMV thing, transferring licenses and all that stuff over. And so my name got flagged in the system because apparently someone in the state of Kansas with my name, birth date, and was 3 feet tall, apparently, had a suspended license. So they told me, you need to write the state of Kansas and ask them to provide documentation proving that's not you. I was like, are you serious? Like, are you not looking at me? I'm 5'11". I'm standing right in front of you. But that's the story.
No, the government that is the dumbest thing. Did we really put a man on the moon? Like, I don't understand. That is insane.
No, the whole thing was a sham.
I just don't understand how, like, that is whatever. Okay.
All right, Eddie. So you work with 64 Audio, and you guys make some of the world's greatest in-ears.
64 different types.
And probably your flagship artist is a lovely lady named Beyonce. Can you give us the story about Beyonce's in-ears?
Yeah. So we worked with Beyonce, for a while now, since like 2016, 2017 and stuff. Since around then, James Berry, who is her monitor engineer, we've had a good relationship with him and that. So she was gearing up to do her most recent tour, and they reached out to us and asked us, she has this idea of what she wants to do. She wants it to be basically just bling all over the place, like shiny everything. So they reached out and they said she wants to do this custom faceplate with diamonds in them from Tiffany. And we were like, okay, that sounds pretty intense. And so we said, yeah, sure, let's go for it. So it was, quite the spectacle. You can actually go on social media, on our Instagram, excuse me, and a couple other spots. I think on Tiffany's page and stuff, we might have a video posted as well. But it was just a great collaboration with Tiffany. They sent us some measurements kind of preliminarily of what they were thinking. We took it to our R&D team. They tested it to see, the dimensions were going to work. And then we sent it back to them. There was lots of back and forth, because it's like, it was a diamond encrusted platinum faceplate. Like, it was just platinum. It was thick. It was maybe like 1/8 of an inch thick. It had diamonds layered over it, and then more diamonds in different carat sizes laid out, something like 80 per side or something like that. And so they were like, we're going to build this. We want to get it right. So they sent a sample over. We confirmed it fit. They did one more confirmation over. And the day those things arrived, man, it was just like everyone was on their feet walking around, because I've never seen something shimmer like that in person. It was, man, we took, like I said, photos, videos and stuff, but those don't do justice as seeing it in person. So it was pretty, it was a pretty cool project to get to do, and also to get to kind of see how the process, on that side of things, which we hadn't quite done yet for, but, to kind of observe and see the feat of engineering that was.
Do you know like the appraisal on what those things cost?
I don't, but I will say that when they shipped to Europe, where her tour began, it was insured somewhere around the six-figure, well over the six-figure range. So,
did it present any technological difficulties? Like, did you have to adapt to having all this like weighty diamonds on it, or was it like, no, it's fine, it's attached to the exterior?
Yeah, that's a great question. They actually built this sort of lip for it to slide into to make sure it was secured. Everything that we use in-house is acrylic based. So like, in terms of like the materials and what we use to adhere the components inside is used with some form of acrylic. And it was kind of like platinum attaching it to acrylic. So they weren't 100% sure, which is, why so much measuring went on, and they sent back and forth samples and stuff. Just to make sure that it was going to adapt properly. So that was probably one of the bigger parts of the challenge, was just to make sure that it was going to stay on there and wasn't going to fall off.
And Eddie, do you endorse churches starting giving campaigns so they can get their worship leaders these same diamond encrusted in-ears?
We have the before version still available on the website. Actually, Beyonce, we have rhinestones that are some sort of, I'm sure, cubic zirconia or something like that, some cheap wish.com product that we can inlay on them that we still sell on the website. So if people want to go for that approach, yeah, that's available.
I don't know that I'd recommend this, Blake. I feel like there are too many documentaries about like church misbehavior out there that, putting rhinestones in your in-ears and then going and leading worship on stage, even though we know, we're talking about fake stones, just feels like it's a bad idea at this point.
Well, listen, I said it. It was a bad idea. I'm just joking around here. That was not to be taken seriously.
And Eddie, who do you think is the queen? Is it Beyonce or is it Taylor?
It's probably who pays his bills, Toby. I call you the king behind your back.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
All right, man. We're giving Eddie the hard questions, just
hey, he's a smart man. I mean, look at that face.
I know, and that beard.
I will say at one point I heard the name Shakira floating around, so I don't know.
Whoa.
Well,
yeah. Now it's getting just fights on here.
Well, because it's Shakira. I mean, that's been stuck in our head since it came out. So Eddie, give us a bit more of your background and your history and how you got into production. We know at this point we got 2 data points. We got started in an early 90s band, and then he's making Beyonce's diamond encrusted earrings. There's got to be some stuff from point A to point B there that's in between. Yeah,
for sure. So for me, I started in tech back in the overhead transparency days. So I don't know if you guys, Toby, probably remember that, Blake.
Oh, yeah.
Walking around with the binder, making sure you had the right laser jet printer to make sure that they didn't smear, and sure, doing the half sheet to make sure that, the verse was only showing and sliding it down during the chorus so it showed up, the whole thing. So, that was back in junior high for me. And that was kind of like my first kind of start into things. I was, like I said, I've been doing music. I've played music in churches growing up. I've served on staff at churches in various capacities over the years, whether it was in, worship pastor role, tech director, as most churches have, wearing both hats at the same time. So that's kind of my background when it comes to that. And on the tech side, kind of having to know how everything works together, the inner workings and stuff. My first digital console was the Yamaha PM1D. That I sat behind, that, even the guys who were operating it didn't really know too much about.
That's a serious board to start with.
And would you believe me if I said we're still selling PM1Ds?
I would. Yeah. And then, not too long after getting familiar with the SD9, and, I actually learned probably 4 or 5 years ago that the SD9 is still a hot commodity item, which shocked me. I was like, what, wasn't that like 15, 20 years ago? But yeah, that was kind of, my first foray, if you will, into like the digital sphere of things in terms of getting hands-on with digital consoles and mixing and stuff. I attended a Bible college. I went on staff after I finished the program. 2 years later, I worked in the audiovisual department. The Bible college doubled as a conference center. It had 15 different rooms. So when I went on staff, my job was to make sure that everything was maintained and functioning. So, everything from like executing room upgrades, converting everything over from analog to digital, making sure that, recorders and stuff like that were hooked up, going from, cassette to CD, because we're talking about 2000.
What's a cassette?
They're coming back.
Yeah. And then, running front of house and stage managing for our worship and production conferences, within the network of Calvary Chapel. That was kind of like the hub where everyone would come to for the big conferences worldwide. So helping run those, the pastors, youth workers, conferences for the network, all of that stuff. And then also engineered in the studio that we had there.
And how'd you get connected with 64 Audio?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I've been on staff at churches in various forms over the years. And about 5.5 years ago, the church I was a part of, it was a church start. Was coming to a close after a couple of years, just different reasons and stuff. But so from there, it was kind of like, I didn't know what was next. We weren't sure. My wife and I were just kind of prayerfully considering what next steps were going to be. And so I had just put feelers out to different companies. I was around then is where I started to pick up a lot more contract work for mixing for different audio companies and stuff, which I still do to some extent today. But so going from like a vocational job in ministry to like, something like this, it was going to be a big leap. So we weren't sure what that was going to look like. So I had applied and then didn't get a call back for like 3 or 4 months. And when they called back, I totally forgot that I had applied for the job. Yeah. And so when they told me what their plan was and who they were hiring for, I more so fit the demographic of like the long-term goal of, what roles they needed filled and stuff. Someone who, had experience in churches and in that capacity, who can speak the language and talk to church customers in that regard. And interestingly enough, though, when I first started with the company, I, as you do with most companies, you come in a customer service role. And not too long after, I jumped into doing artist relations. So I did that for about a year and a half before I jumped into the church role. So kind of still do a little bit more artist relations stuff today. But yeah, that's kind of like where everything got started for me here.
So speaking of artist relationships, we looked at the 64 Audio website, and you guys have a very, select roster, select meaning amazing artists on there. So obviously, we talked about Beyonce, Lauren Daigle, Jay-Z, John Mayer. Like, do you have some pretty cool stories of meeting some of these artists, about, being out on tour, stopping at shows? We want the juice, Eddie.
Their in-ear's not working, and they threaten you with an inch of your life.
Oh, man. So I always say that the answer to the question of, if you had a time machine, where would you travel back in time to? And the answer for me would be to 15-year-old me, because 15-year-old me would not believe half the things I would tell them that I've experienced working for this company in the last 5 years. Most recently, it was kind of comical. My boss came up to me. I was, responding to some emails, and he's like, "Hey, are you available next week to fly down to LA?" I'm like, "Sure, yeah, I could do that. I mean, for the day, like I fly down and fly back the same day." He's like, "Yeah, you should be able to do that." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds great. Just to confirm, I'm flying out in the morning and then flying back that night. Sleep in my own bed."
This is how I clear things with Toby. I ask him the same question 5 times to make sure he knows.
He's like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Okay, next question. Happy to do it, but why?" He's like, "Oh, we need someone to go rep Metallica." And I'm like, "Okay, where are the other 2 guys who are in line before me?" One of the guys, we all, aside from working here, still do production work. Not just myself, one of our other guys, our marketing manager, mixes at a church on the weekends as well. And then another couple guys do some touring still. They either, are a tech or they tour manage, that type of thing. So one of our guys, the first guy in line, was out on tour already, managing the tour. And then our other guy, who would be next in line, was out meeting with Beyonce, interestingly enough. So he was unavailable. And so I was like, "Sure." That's what he told me. He's like, "They're gone. They're not available." I'm like, "Okay, sure." So just to clarify, I'm flying out in the morning, going down to LA, spending the day with Metallica, and coming back and sleeping in my bed that night. He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What do I bring with me?" "Nothing." "What do you mean nothing?" "No, they hired their own like audiologists to do molds and stuff like that. So I'm literally just going just to be there." He's like, "Yep." I'm like, "Cool. Sounds good to me." So that was like a pinch me moment, because I'm just like standing in the airport waiting to board my flight. I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, how is this even possible?
Eddie, if things ever burn down at Church Gear for me, can I come work with you? That sounds amazing, dude.
So
yeah, and it's been great.
Yeah, how was James Hetfield's earwax situation?
Did you save some? We could sell that on eBay.
Yeah, those guys are great. He had like, man, it was just great, because seeing, you see the guys on stage and you see how they interact and stuff like that. But, James walking in cowboy boots and his jeans and his Stetson and stuff, it's just like, yeah, this is cool. Like, you get the full picture of, what these guys are like on and off stage. So it's been really cool.
That is fun. Blake, do we have any of those pinch me moments at Church Gear? I mean, we meet, all the celebs, like Eddie, obviously, Jeff Sandstrom, like, all the famous people in the church production world.
I will admit that the first time we met the MXU guys, I was definitely pinching myself, because I'd done like a dossier on who's the people in the space, who should we become friends with, and they were like, "We'll never be friends with them, they're too cool." And then we became friends with them pretty quickly. So I know what that feels like. I guess, not to the level of Metallica though.
Yeah, Metallica's cool, but I also saw, you guys even have, Elevation and Highlands on your artist roster. Are you guys specifically, so is your role specifically working with churches, or are you with all artists, or does it depend on the day?
Yeah, actually. So depends on the day sometimes, like a day like your boss comes up and asks if you can go rep Metallica. But primarily my role is working with churches and worship artists. So, like you mentioned, Highlands and Elevation, they're folks. I mean, when you got kind of the production that Elevation's running, you got multi-campuses and you got your touring, aspect of your church and stuff like that. So like working with Bethel and Hillsong, those guys I'm working with pretty regularly, making sure their teams are all set up. And then also I always like to mention that it's the church down the street that you never heard of, so big and small all the way around, we're working with all levels of churches.
As you list those church names, do either of you guys notice how high churches love to get? Church of the Highlands, Elevation. I mean, there's a lot of
Hill song.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of height is all I'm saying. Well, speaking of churches, churches often trail behind the world by about, what is it, Toby, 10 to 15 years?
I mean, some of the churches are just breaking out their brand new song they just learned, Lord, I Lift Your Name on High. So, it is a common theme that oftentimes churches, and not Elevation and Highlands, they're often on the cutting edge, but, a lot of churches, Eddie, are just now getting into Avioms, like the original Avioms. We still sell a lot of Avioms at Church Gear.
Eddie, we sell packs and packs of Avioms at a time.
So have you seen kind of the same situation where, you've got churches trying to catch up and even asking you, what, you're at conferences with churches. Are they coming up and just asking basic questions? Is there a level of just like basic education that you're having to provide the church down the street?
Yeah, great question. A lot of it, I think we're past the kind of monitor phase of things in terms of wedges. People are very well familiar these days what in-ears are and stuff. I think what we're more looking at is kind of going from a Shure 215 or like a generic KZ Amazon special type of thing that a lot of people are kind of coming off of. So they want to know, hey, I have this in-ear from Shure or this KZ. This one has this amount of drivers or this one has that amount of drivers or what have you. What's the differences and, what's the advantages? That type of stuff is more what we're seeing. And I am, like you said, seeing a lot of Avioms still. The churches that I mix at, they're still using the A16-2s or A360s or I think or A320s, whatever model that is, the new higher up ones. But, I'm still seeing a lot of those around.
And you talked about the basic Shure models. And I remember, 15 years ago when I was leading worship, I know that custom in-ears were available at that point, but I was still using like the basic things that came with, the Shure PSM 200, the standard in-ears. And we didn't have room mics. We didn't have ambience created in the in-ears. It wasn't in stereo. And so, like I mentioned in the beginning, I was using one ear in and one ear out. And the ear that I had in, I had to crank up because of all the room noise coming in the other one. So it was very disjointed. And so,
Toby, that's where you got your vertigo, man.
What, Blake? I can't hear you anymore. And so are you having to, educate churches on just the basics of how to mix in-ears properly so that you don't hurt yourself?
Yeah. Definitely. That's a question that we kind of get regularly from people. I always tell people, because one of the things that kind of sets us apart and makes us unique in terms of a company is some of the technologies and stuff that we're using. We have a pressure relief system, like Toby mentioned earlier, with like you're putting a suction cup in your ear, but our, technology called Apex alleviates that pressure. So you're getting more sense of openness when you're listening to your mix. We utilize a high driver that creates, a better representation of the highs and widens the mids and drops the lows. So we're getting a lot more technical aspects in our product, than you would compare to like a Shure 215. So kind of explaining those things and showing what the advantages are of, what our product provides and what it offers compared to like even going from a generic fit that can be prone to letting air escape, which factors into how much low end you retain versus like the custom seal that it provides. You get more low end retention and it isolates, to allow everything to be heard better. So things like that.
And there's some like basic education that is of health concern. I've seen posts in like church sound media tech groups of people saying, is there another option for my in-ear monitor system? Because I can't turn it up loud enough for me to hear what I need to hear. And that's That's dangerous because those things are made so that you should have plenty of volume and not hurt yourself. If you're wanting it louder than that, like Eddie, would you say that you're at that point, you're using the wrong ears? Like you need to find some custom in-ears that you can create those fancy words that you said so eloquently.
Yeah, definitely. The term kind of what you're talking about is headroom, when it comes to that, you want more space. You're wanting to not have to crank your mix up as loud to get that. And just about everything that we offer, in our lineup has that, to certain degrees and stuff, start talking more technical in terms of sensitivity and all those types of things, what can be handled in that. But for the most part, you're not going to deal with that aspect of it so much when you're getting into like a set from us, even our 2-driver model. That's what I'm actually wearing right now, if you can see. But
where are the diamonds?
Yeah.
But even it's great for everyday use, for just listening to music and carrying around with you, and then it works well on stage. But if you're wanting the kind of more nuanced, like listening to a record type of stuff, you're gonna step in more towards the top end stuff. So that's a very, very much a factor, because it's like if you're overdriving your ears, one with the universal, it's going to be more likely, because you're not getting that isolation and hearing things properly. Another thing too is like with wearing one ear on stage, you're trying to overcompensate. So you have one ear closed off and the other ear that's open. So you're hearing, depending on your proximity to like the live speaker, you're going to get something in the range of 95 to, over decibels that you're hearing externally versus like trying to match it on the other ear that's closed off. And so you're cranking your pack. And so you kind of lose a little bit more of that dynamic element that you get with wearing both ears, and overdrive the one ear that can, cause hearing damage later down the road if you do it too often.
And are you guys seeing more and more churches use in-ears for their broadcast mix if they don't have an isolated space where they can use studio monitors? Are they going that direction?
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing that quite regularly too. A lot of, especially that's where I don't have to explain to you the number COVID did in terms of, how church is being done these days, in terms of like every church you walk into now has a broadcast rig and puts more emphasis and value in production and stuff. They took the leap to do those things. But even as far as like using it for comms and stuff, with in production environments and settings and stuff like that, we're seeing a lot of teams starting to switch over and use that because it gives them that isolation, a little bit more clarity to be able to hear things better.
Okay, Blake, let's talk about wedges. So aside from what the bullies gave you in middle school, Blake, what's a wedge?
One, no one gave me a wedgie because I'm a double black belt. Number two, a wedge is the very delicious Buffalo Wild Wings fries, and you can dip them in Asian zing sauce, and it's freaking
I'm going to give you a wedgie
amazing.
right now. Oh, wait, you don't wear underwear, Blake.
Why do you think it's a preventative measure?
So, Eddie, are you seeing still a lot of churches using wedges? Are you seeing like more a combination, or are most churches that you see just going fully in-ears this day and age?
And I would throw a bonus question inside of that topic of like, how do you advise churches when it's time to get in-ears and when it's not?
Yeah. I mean, I think if I'm seeing wedges at all, it's going to be in smaller venues like a coffee shop or maybe the youth room or something like that. Something that's not as smaller stages and stuff like that. That's where you're going to get more of that. But yeah, most places, I mean, I'm shocked that some churches even have youth groups using in-ears now. I'm just like, it would have been awesome when I was in youth band. Like, it would have been super cool to have that as an advantage, even a short 215 or something like that would have been super cool to have. But yeah, so like I said, it's more of kind of going from that 215 generic universal fit in-ear to custom, that we're seeing a lot of changeover happen.
And as I visit a lot of churches, obviously like a choir or an orchestra can be a little tricky because you could have, 50, 60 people up there on stage. You can't necessarily give them all in-ears. And so oftentimes they're just like little monitor cubes or something. I was actually at Thomas Road Baptist Church, which is connected to Liberty University, and they have downfills above their choir as their choir monitors. And that was interesting. Just imagine speakers above your head firing down on you. It's very tricky for the audio guys to mix, but it'd be really nice if you could just give all of them in-ears.
Toby, I've heard a lot of rigging horror stories at this point on this podcast. I don't want any speakers above me. Even the string lights we have here are too much.
Eddie, are you seeing any new technology coming down the pipeline in this, space of in-ears and monitors and all this world?
Yeah. Kind of one of the things that put us on the market was kind of affordability in terms of like how inexpensive things were. And then, as companies just grow and expand, you start to deal with natural growing pains and stuff like that. But one of the cool things about us is we've continued to pursue innovation and not compromise in terms of like all those aspects. So one of the coolest technologies, like I mentioned earlier, that we use is Apex. It's a pressure relief system. It helps provide, relief. You can listen for longer. You can actually turn your mix pretty loud. It would actually take, we've done tests. It would have to be upwards of 120 decibels to be listening in order to get it to, overdrive your in-ears. So that way, and that's, you're going to damage your ears and it's going to hurt. So you're not going to crank your pack or anything that loud for it. So, between Apex, which helps with some of that, and then our tubeless high driver, it utilizes at the end of the canal on in-ears, and this is hard to explain without it being visual, but essentially at the end of every in-ear, there is traditionally like multiple bores, a couple smaller ones and two larger ones, depending on how many drivers and stuff you have. What we did is we incorporated a single larger bore that helps open things up so you get in that clarity. And then from that aspect, we kind of look at things acoustically. It's like, okay, what can we do with this? So we set a tubeless driver. Every driver traditionally has been connected to those tubes, sending, depending on the frequency ranges down into that. And that's what provides a frequency response. With the high driver, we're able to achieve, like I said, clearer highs, wider mids, deeper lows. And so a couple of technologies that we actually started to introduce now, came out a couple of weeks ago, is kind of the next step towards innovation. And it's interesting and unique. And I'm going to try my best to describe it again without the visual aids, because, you got to kind of think acoustically and technically with some of this stuff. But one of the technologies is called true isobaric. What it is, every driver, the speakers in the in-ears is essentially, millimeters in size, some quarter to half, maybe half inch, not quite quarter inch, but half inch, no, eighth inch, sorry, going backwards. But every driver is about 8-inch in size and space in the in-ear, maybe smaller depending. But you're working with, limited spacing. So with low end, it's kind of like you need more, more to drive and push the air to maximize the sonic spacing. The largest you kind of get in like a KZ in-ear is what they call a dynamic driver. It's more cylindrical. It's like probably, the small little batteries that kind of go in the toys. You think of the small ones, about that size, 9 millimeters in diameter. So what you end up having is something that's pushing air, but nowhere for the air to go. So with true isobaric, what we figured out is we coupled two of those low dynamic drivers and configured it to allow better dampening. So you're getting more low frequency response without the low end getting smeared. So you're not going to get something that sounds or feels overdriven when you crank the lows in your ears. That's something we introduced in a model that we call velour. It's a made-up word. We invented that too.
All words are made up, Eddie. That's the thing. You imbue meaning upon them.
But that's one of the technologies. And like I mentioned, with our high driver that allows for more clarity, we utilize a new technology called waveguide. And essentially, with drivers and tubing and stuff like that, you have different components that allow certain frequencies to pass through. And then you have other things that kind of help it, with phase time alignment and things like that factor in. But with an open driver, it's kind of like you get what you get. It's open, similar to like an open back amp. It's going to breathe, and it's going to breathe and sound how it sounds. And you can't really control. I mean, you might have some tone knobs at the top of you might have some tone knobs at the top of the amp, but anyways, all that aside, the technology with waveguide that you're getting is you're getting more control of the frequency response, and you're able to help, things translate in specific ways. So
It's funny watching, Blake try and understand technical terms. It's kind of like when we tried to explain immersive audio to him, and then he then sat in the MXU demo room and they played stereo, and then they turned on soundscape and his mind was blown. I feel like you need to put AirPods in his ears and be like, okay, listen to your Footballers podcast with that. And now let's give you the 64 audio customs. And then you listen and watch your mind blown again.
You remembered the name, Toby. That's really nice.
And Eddie, how about is there a 64 audio version of AirPods where it can connect to your iPhone and Bluetooth and all that stuff for us dummies?
We would love for that to be a thing, but taking a step in that direction with R&D and stuff, you start dealing with things like DSP and radio frequencies and stuff like that, and that's well beyond any of us have any experience in. And then so it's definitely a project where, you look at it and you're like, that would be super cool to have, but you got to outsource it. So short of, acquiring a company that already does it, it's going to be a big feat to achieve when we get there.
I bet it'd still be cheaper than Beyonce's in-ears, though.
Well, and let us know before you do it so we can get in early on that IPO. This is not insider trading, FTC. Okay, so Eddie, if I'm a church tech listening to this and I've got my worship leader, begging to get in-ears next year, he wants me to include it in my tech budget, but I don't want to do that. I want to put in money for the next Digico X711. How do you advise churches on hey, you definitely don't need in-ears. You definitely do. If budget provides. I'm guessing those are the three categories. How do you, if you were church tech listening to this, how would you kind of advise them?
The overall kind of approach to things is really, what are you going for? It's just like everything else, right? You put money in what you value in terms of production. So if, you need a better projector, or you want to move to the LED wall, you want the, the SQ5 or Q5, sorry, from Allen and Heath, or you want the Digico SD9. You want the KZ universal generic, or do you want the 64 audio custom in-ears? There's advantages to all those things. So my job is to help customers find the right, model, because we have everything from 2 drivers all the way up to 18 drivers per ear. So how do they know which of those is going to be best for what they do? I'm here to help answer those questions and help them figure out, what in those spaces work well for you, but then also what do you need? So, in terms of purchasing and things like that, what we look at, we do work with churches in terms of pricing and stuff. So we have a church program that's great, that works well, but then we also have group buy incentives and stuff like that. So if you got, 20 people, we're going to look at that and we're going to offer something that, is going to work well and spread out for everyone to be able to get into what they're looking for.
And oftentimes, Blake, the production department will purchase the wireless packs, like the Shure PSM, and they'll come with the, standard Shure earbuds, and they will provide those, but the custom in-ear molds, those are literally a personal fit. They have to. Are you aware, Blake, of
I am, because Jeremy, my best friend, who is a worship leader, got in-ears, and he was so excited. And the way that people talk about their in-ears is a very intimate, hallowed tone of voice.
I mean, just think of contact lenses. It's the same kind of deal that, your production department isn't going to get a bunch of contact lenses and then say, here you go, here's some generic contact lenses. They're all custom fit. They're literally in your ears.
Here's your in-eyes.
Yeah. It's often a personal purchase that, the worship team or the band or whatever, they'll buy their own in-ears and then just plug them into the wireless packs.
I see. Well, Eddie, if that didn't fit my ear right, that might be a little bit of a disaster. So speaking of, I'm trying to make a segue here.
Yeah, that was a terrible segue.
Speaking of disasters, do you have any good disaster stories of your time working with so many artists on the road? Maybe a time that their in-ear didn't fit. Maybe a time you went to measure someone's ear and they had so much earwax it broke your mold.
Man, off the top of my head, and even trying to thinking ahead to some questions like that, I've seen more. Let's just say this: I've experienced and seen more of my fair share of worship fails in person than I have, other kind of technical failures and stuff like that. So, to the point where it's man, I wish we had a camera. We did not have the camera out, So
Moral of the story, always have a camera going.
I have a disaster story I can just throw in because I heard it. We were talking about Chris Tomlin and this, the Church of the City 10-year anniversary. And honestly, I forget who I was talking to, but I was saying how, Chris was really struggling with his ears. He couldn't hear certain things. He kept going over through the monitor mixer, asking for changes. And the person I was talking to must have done some tech work for him at some point. He said, well, it couldn't have been worse than the time I blew up his in-ears.
Oh my gosh.
I hope not while they were in his freaking ears.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't think it did any permanent damage to his ears, but it was very much ow, that hurts. You pop the ears and literally one of his monitors blew. And I'm sure that did not feel good to his ears. So that person was horrified that had happened on his watch. And yeah.
Eddie, have you ever heard of that happening?
So that makes me think of, I was going to say, if you want to talk disaster on the customer end of things, I've heard of sound spikes happening and stuff. A lot of people, one of the number one kind of service things that we deal with is earwax. Go figure, something that goes in your ear, right? But sometimes, wax builds up in a slightly thin layer, so thin that you can't even tell that there's wax there. So we always tell people clean your ears, and they come in, they clean them, they swap out a couple things here and there, and they work brand new. What did you guys do? I'm like, we just cleaned them. There's just no possible way. But there was one scenario specifically that makes me think of is there was a sound spike, and the guy was like, my ears just don't work anymore. And apparently the pressure from the sound spike pushed a bunch of wax forward and caused some clogging going on in there. We've also heard stories of someone sending their ears in. We can't find the email, but it's a 64 audio legend that a customer sent in their in-ears back to us because a panda ate them. Not sure what they were doing wearing in-ears around a panda. I've heard my in-ears were dropped when I was on a golf cart and they got ran over and crushed. They got crushed in the door after church. I heard, this happened to me personally, honestly. I've heard it from a customer, but before me too, this happened. My dog ate my in-ears. I was running a rehearsal one time in my music room, and I stepped out to go grab a cup of coffee, and I had left them sitting out, and my dog was in the room. And then I come back not even 2 minutes later, and my ears are crushed. I'm like, what on earth just happened? And apparently we have some sort of chemical that dogs like, and it reminds them of them, and they just get gnawing. So pretty crazy.
I wonder if your in-ears, that's like a QVC check. Can it make it through a dog's intestinal system and still work? That'd be quite impressive. Well, speaking of things that still work, Eddie, tech takeaways, they're always working, and we're always asking for them. And so we love to wrap all our episodes with one, and we were hoping we could get one from you.
Clean your ears. No.
There it is. What if he had said that and hung the Zoom up?
It's a very practical tech takeaway.
No, really. That really is very much a thing. We sell tools and products and stuff that help with that. Everyone's ears are different. Some produce and generate wax more regularly than others. Others not so much. But like I said, 99.9% of the issues that we work with deal with wax. So I would say, if you every set of in-ears, no matter if it's us, no matter if it's like a JH or an Eau Claire or UE, they all include a little cleaning brush. Just give your ears a little scrub and pick away any wax. And pro tip is, honestly, you can just get like a alcohol pad, like a little, they sell at the Target or like CVS or something, drugstore. You can grab one of those pads and just wipe it down, and it'll just look brand new. So clean your ears.
I'm feeling a marketing tagline here, Blake. Your mix sucks. Clean your ears.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think that really just points to an overall takeaway of doing the little things that you get bored of are most of the consequential things. Well, Eddie, we really appreciate you coming on, man, and giving us the scoop on the ears. No scoops of earwax, thankfully. No one's headphones exploded today, so that's always a plus. Oh, wait, Eddie, what do you want to plug, man? I know we've said 64 Audio a couple times, but real quick, you want to plug them?
Yeah, 64 Audio, world-class in-ear monitors, and all the other fun things we've said over the years. But no, yeah. Like I mentioned, we do pricing with churches and stuff, so we're always looking to help people get into where they need to get to. So If you're part of a church and you want to, get set up with an account, you can email me directly, Eddie, EDDIE, at 64audio.com. It's a pretty simple, straightforward process. I just ask a couple questions, gather some information about your church, build an account, and then we set pricing. If, like I mentioned, if you're looking to do a group buy with your church, we can look at, it's based off of kind of like how many and what models and stuff like that. So we kind of look at those things and kind of put some numbers together and try and work towards something favorable for everyone. So.
And if you work with Eddie, you can then say you are 1 degree of separation from Metallica. So if that's not a reason to reach out, I don't know what.
Or royalty.
There we go. All of the above. Thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, have you ever heard that something like, on average, 2 spiders a year crawl into your ear while you sleep?
No, I thought that was you eat spiders. Never heard of you hearing spiders.
I feel like I've heard that. And I feel like that's a great plug for in-ears, that if you just purchase comfortable in-ears and left them in your ear while you sleep, how is a spider going to get in there?
I think that would be a good ad for them. And if I was thinking of an ad for us, I'd say we should start encrusting our gear with diamonds and selling it. It seemed to work for Eddie and them. What if we did it with zirconium and told them people it was diamonds, then we could charge a lot of money?
This is a good point. I mean, I'd rather have diamonds in my ears than spiders.
That's true. And if you would like to put diamonds in your friends' ears instead of spiders, send them this podcast and say, hey, put this podcast in your ears.